She was offered as meat to a monster, wrapped in a heavy veil to hide the brutal scars her own family mocked. They expected to hear her desperate screams echoing from the Beast King's fortress. Instead, they heard the terrifying, impossible thud of a ruthless king falling to his knees. History records the winter of 1342 as the cruelest the kingdom of Æthelgard had ever endured. But for Lady Genevieve of House Arrington, the cold was nothing new. She had lived in a freezing isolation for 8 years. It began on the night of October 14th, 1734. A catastrophic fire swept through the eastern wing of the Arrington estate, while her father, Lord Cedric, and her stepmother, Lady Beatrice, fled to the safety of the courtyard. 12-year-old Genevieve ran back into the collapsing manor to save a scullery maid's trapped infant. She emerged coughing blood, clutching the child to her chest, but a falling, burning beam had caught her. The left side of her face, her neck, and her shoulder were left carrying the permanent, jagged legacy of the flames. In a medieval society where a noblewoman's sole currency was her flawless beauty, Genevieve was instantly rendered bankrupt. Instead of praising her heroism, her family treated her survival as a grotesque embarrassment. Lady Beatrice, a woman whose vanity was matched only by her cruelty, banished Genevieve to the drafty servants' quarters in the attic. Her half-sister, Rosalind, who possessed hair like spun gold and skin like untouched porcelain, was paraded before lords and knights, while Genevieve was hidden away like a family curse. They called her the Gargoyle of Arrington. "Keep your face turned, creature," Rosalind would sneer, during the rare occasions Genevieve was permitted in the main hall to scrub the hearths. "You will curdle the wine with that wretched visage." Genevieve bore the mockery with a silent, iron-clad resilience. She learned to hide the left side of her face behind a curtain of thick, chestnut hair. She found solace in the estate's vast library, educating herself in history, herbalism, and the ancient treaties of the realm. It was in those dusty tomes that she first read about the northern wastes and their ruler, King Alaric of the lycanthrope clans, widely feared by humans as the Beast of Oakhaven. For centuries, a fragile, bloody truce had existed between the human lords of the south and the werewolf clans of the north. But by the autumn of 1342, the treaty was crumbling. A border dispute had resulted in the deaths of 3 Lycan scouts. In retaliation, King Alaric amassed an army of savage, shifting warriors along the freezing river of the borderlands. Panic swept through the human capital. To prevent a slaughter, the human king brokered a desperate appeasement. The noble houses of the border would offer a bride of high birth to the Beast King, a blood pact to bind the 2 races. The lot fell to House Arrington. Lord Cedric was commanded to send his prized daughter, Rosalind, to the Howling Woods to be the Beast King's mate. The night the royal decree arrived, the Arrington manor descended into hysteria. Rosalind wept so violently she ruptured blood vessels in her eyes, throwing herself at her father's boots. "He is a monster, father. He drinks human blood from skulls. He will tear me apart on our wedding night. I cannot go to the woods." Lady Beatrice, her eyes glittering with a venomous and desperate cunning, placed a steadying hand on her husband's shoulder. "My lord," she whispered, her voice like sliding silk. "The king's decree demands a daughter of your blood. It does not specify which daughter." Cedric's face paled. "You cannot mean Genevieve. The Beast King demands a high-born bride of noble grace. If we send him a scarred, broken thing, he will see it as a mortal insult. He will slaughter us all. "High as a dog, Cedric," Beatrice hissed, her true malice bleeding through. "A feral, mindless wolf who sleeps on dirt and hunts in the mud. He will not know the difference between beauty and a gargoyle. Dress the scarred wretch in Rosalind's old finery. Put a heavy mourning veil over her hideous face. By the time the beast realizes what he has been given, the treaty will be signed, our duty fulfilled, and the creature will be his problem to dispose of." Standing in the shadows of the corridor, holding a tray of polished silver, Genevieve heard every word. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but no tears fell. She had stopped crying for her father's love years ago. The next morning, Genevieve was dragged from the kitchens. For the first time in nearly a decade, she was bathed in scented oils, though the maids scrubbed her roughly, whispering prayers of warding when they touched her scarred skin. She was shoved into a gown of heavy crimson velvet that had once belonged to Rosalind. It was beautiful, but it felt like a shroud. Finally, Lady Beatrice stepped into the room, holding a thick black lace veil. She slammed it over Genevieve's head, pinning it tightly to her hair so it could not blow away in the wind. "Listen to me, you wretched mistake!" Beatrice spat, her fingers digging painfully into Genevieve's unscarred shoulder. "You will not speak. You will not lift this veil until you are locked in the beast's chambers. If you reveal your hideousness before the ink is dry on the treaty, I swear upon the heavens I will have the guards drown you in the frozen river myself. You are meat to him. Accept your fate." Genevieve looked at her stepmother through the dark mesh of the veil. "I accept my fate, Lady Beatrice," she said, her voice eerily calm, possessing a quiet dignity that made the older woman flinch. "I only hope you are prepared for yours." Without another word, Genevieve walked out to the waiting carriage, stepping out of the home that had been her prison, and toward the monster they believed would be her executioner. The journey to the northern wastes took 3 grueling weeks. The human escort consisted of 30 heavily armed knights, led by Captain Reginald, a pompous, cruel man who spent the entire journey drinking heavily and placing wagers with his men on how many hours Genevieve would survive the beast's bed. "I give her till midnight," Reginald laughed loudly by the campfire one evening, ensuring his voice carried to the freezing carriage where Genevieve huddled under a thin wool blanket. "Wolves don't like burnt meat, eh? He'll snap a neck the moment he pulls back that veil." Genevieve ignored them. She spent the journey looking out the small, frosted window. As they crossed the jagged peaks of the Spine Mountains, the landscape changed. The lush, manicured fields of the human kingdom gave way to towering, ancient pines, their branches heavy with snow. The air grew thinner, sharper, smelling of ozone, crushed pine needles, and wild magic. It was terrifying, yet for the first time in her life, Genevieve felt a strange flutter of freedom. If she was to die here, at least she would die away from the sneering faces of her family. On the 21st day, they arrived at Ironhold. It was a fortress carved directly into the side of a colossal mountain. There were no delicate glass windows or manicured gardens, only brutal, imposing black stone, massive iron gates, and fire pits that burned with a fierce, roaring heat. As the carriage rumbled into the vast courtyard, the air was thick with tension. Hundreds of lichen warriors stood in the freezing snow, entirely unbothered by the cold. They wore thick furs and boiled leather, their eyes glowing with unnatural, predatory shades of amber, gold, and violent green. They did not cheer. They merely watched the human delegation with a silent, terrifying hunger. Captain Reginald's bravado vanished instantly. His hands shook as he dismounted his horse and approached the carriage door. He yanked it open, roughly grabbing Genevieve's arm and pulling her out into the biting cold. "Keep your head down," he hissed, his breath pluming in the icy air. "And remember your orders." Genevieve stood tall, despite the trembling in her knees. The crimson gown dragged in the snow, and the heavy black veil obscured her vision, but she could feel the crushing weight of 1,000 predatory eyes upon her. Then the massive iron doors of the great hall groaned open. The silence that fell over the courtyard was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. King Alaric stepped out onto the stone balcony overlooking the courtyard, flanked by 2 enormous, dire wolves. He was magnificent, terrifying, and entirely, completely unlike the mindless beast the human rumors had painted. He stood well over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to carry the world. His hair was midnight black, falling wildly around a face that looked as though it had been carved from granite. A jagged battle scar slashed down his right cheek, a testament to decades of brutal warfare. But it was his eyes that stole the breath from Genevieve's lungs. Even through her veil, she could see them, a piercing, luminous silver, like 2 full moons trapped in a stormy sky. He moved with a lethal, fluid grace, descending the stone steps into the courtyard. The lichen warriors parted for him instantly, lowering their heads in absolute submission. Captain Reginald dropped to one knee, forcing Genevieve to bow beside him. "Great King Alaric," Reginald stammered, his voice cracking with fear, "I bring you the tribute from House Arrington, a bride of noble birth, to seal the treaty between our peoples." Alaric stopped 10 paces away. The scent of him washed over Genevieve, wood smoke, fresh snowfall, and an intoxicating, primal musk that made her pulse thunder loudly in her ears. The Beast King did not look at Captain Reginald. His silver eyes were locked entirely on the shivering girl in the crimson dress. His nostrils flared. For werewolves, scent was the soul. It told them of a person's health, their fears, their lies. But to an Alpha King, scent also held the ancient, sacred pull of the fates. Alaric took a step forward. A low, rumbling growl vibrated in his chest. It wasn't a sound of anger. It was a sound of earth-shattering realization. Reginald, misinterpreting the growl, panicked. He thought the beast was offended by the veiled, silent offering. "She is shy, my king," Reginald quickly lied, his voice shrill. "A demure flower of the south, but I assure you, beneath this veil is a suitable vessel for your desires." Alaric ignored the captain. He stepped directly in front of Genevieve. The sheer size of him blocked out the pale winter sun. "Stand," Alaric commanded. His voice was a deep, gravelly baritone that sent a shock wave of heat straight down Genevieve's spine. Slowly, Genevieve rose to her feet. She was tall for a woman, but she barely reached his chest. "Why do you wear a shroud, little bird?" Alaric asked softly, his tone completely at odds with his terrifying appearance. Genevieve swallowed hard. "Because my family decreed I am not fit for the light, your grace," she whispered. Reginald shot up, his face pale with terror. "My king, do not listen to her. She is—" "Silence, human," Alaric snapped, not raising his voice, but the sheer lethal intent in it made Reginald collapse back into the snow, trembling violently. Alaric reached out with a massive, calloused hand. Genevieve braced herself, expecting him to rip the veil away and strike her when he saw her face. She closed her eyes tightly beneath the lace. Instead, his fingers were impossibly gentle. He found the pins holding the veil to her hair and carefully undid them. Slowly, he lifted the black lace, letting it fall away into the snow. A collective gasp echoed from the human knights behind her. Reginald squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the Beast King's roar of fury, waiting for the slaughter to begin, for the insult of being given a scarred, ruined bride. Genevieve kept her eyes cast down, her heart pounding frantically against her ribs. The harsh winter light hit the left side of her face, illuminating the thick, ridged burn scars that twisted from her cheekbone down past her collarbone. She waited for the mockery. She waited for the disgust. But it never came. Instead, Alaric let out a shaky, jagged breath. He stepped so close to her that the heat radiating from his massive body chased away the winter chill. He raised his hand again, and the tip of his thumb lightly, reverently, traced the edge of the scar on her cheek. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through Genevieve. She gasped, finally looking up into his silver eyes. There was no pity in them. There was no revulsion. There was only absolute awe, and a possessive, burning devotion that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "They sent me a warrior," Alaric murmured, his voice thick with raw emotion. He leaned in, burying his face in the curve of her unscarred neck, inhaling deeply. "My mate." The words sent a shock wave through the courtyard. The Lycan warriors erupted into a chorus of triumphant howls, dropping to their knees in the snow. Captain Reginald stared in open-mouthed horror. The gargoyle of Arrington was the Beast King's fated mate. Alaric pulled back, his silver eyes locking onto Genevieve's. Then the most feared creature in the realm, the ruthless Beast King of the Northern Wastes, did the unthinkable. He stepped back, lowered his massive frame, and bowed onto one knee before her in the snow. He took her small, trembling hand in his and pressed his lips to her scarred knuckles. "Welcome home, my queen," Alaric declared, his voice echoing across the silent mountains. The first few weeks at Ironhold shattered every lie Genevieve had ever been told about the lycanthrope clans. She had expected to be thrown into a dungeon or a den of mud and bone. Instead, she awoke her first morning in a massive chamber, warmed by dual hearths, wrapped in furs, softer than anything she had ever touched in Ethelgard. When her new handmaidens, tall, fiercely muscled Lycan women named Matilda and Brenna, came to dress her, Genevieve reflexively reached up to hide her face. Matilda gently pulled Genevieve's hand away. "Do not hide your glory here, my queen," Matilda said, her amber eyes wide with genuine reverence. "Among the wolves, scars are the written history of a warrior's soul. To survive the kiss of fire means the mountain gods have forged you in their own image. You are sacred to us." Genevieve wept then, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming, terrifying weight of sudden acceptance. For 8 years, she had been a gargoyle. Here, in a land of supposed monsters, she was considered divine. Her relationship with King Alaric blossomed not through force, but through a slow, deliberate tenderness that unraveled Genevieve's defensive walls. He did not lock her away. He invited her to sit beside him at the War Council table, valuing her extensive knowledge of Ethelgard's politics and treaties, knowledge she had gleaned from her years locked in the Arrington library. He listened to her when she spoke. He looked at her not just with the burning possessiveness of a fated mate, but with profound respect. One evening, as a ferocious blizzard battered the thick stone walls of Ironhold, they sat together on a thick rug before the roaring fire in his private chambers. Alaric carefully brushed the heavy chestnut hair away from the left side of her face. His massive fingers, deadly enough to crush a man's skull, traced the jagged ridges of her burns with feather-light adoration. "They told me I would frighten you," Genevieve whispered, leaning into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. "They said I would curdle your blood." Alaric's jaw tightened, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. "Your family is blunt, Genevieve. They look at a diamond forged in pressure and see only a rock. When I look at these scars, I see the bravery of a 12-year-old girl who ran into an inferno to save a child that wasn't hers. I see the absolute purest essence of a queen." He pressed a lingering, reverent kiss to the worst of the scarring on her collarbone, sending a tremor of pure fire through her blood. "You are my fated mate, the other half of my soul. I would burn Ethelgard to the ground to keep you safe." But Ethelgard was already burning, though not from dragon fire or lichen wrath. 7 months after Genevieve's departure, a devastating blight struck the southern kingdom. The wheat fields turned to black ash, and the rivers thickened with toxic algae. Famine gripped the human lands. Panic swept through the capital, and the human king, Henry, grew desperate. Winter was approaching again, and without the surplus grain hoarded in the vast subterranean silos of the northern wastes, thousands would freeze and starve. King Henry commanded Lord Cedric Arrington to travel north and beg the Beast King for a trade alliance, leveraging the supposed tribute bride he had sent months prior. Lady Beatrice and Rosalind, their estate suffering from the famine and their coffers running dry, insisted on coming. "The creature is likely dead, Cedric," Beatrice had sneered as they packed their thinning winter cloaks, "or living like a dog in the dirt. But if she breathes, you must remind her of her duty to her blood. She owes us her life. If that feral king has grown bored of her, perhaps we can offer him Rosalind after all. The beast might trade his grain for true beauty." Rosalind shuddered, clutching her perfect porcelain cheeks. "I will not sleep with a monster, Mother." "You will smile and look pretty, Rosalind," Beatrice snapped. "We need his gold and his grain. We will retrieve the gargoyle, secure the trade, and leave this wretched icebox." They expected a savage encampment. They expected bones scattered in the snow and feral beasts gnawing on raw meat. Instead, when the Arrington carriage crossed the heavily guarded borders of the howling woods, they found paved roads, advanced aqueducts, and bustling market towns where lichens and northern humans traded freely in peace. And as they finally rode into the colossal courtyard of Ironhold, they were met with a military discipline that rivaled the human king's own royal guard. They were escorted into the great hall by lichen warriors, who looked at them not with hunger, but with barely concealed disgust. The heavy iron doors swung open, echoing like a death knell in the cavernous space. Lord Cedric, Lady Beatrice, and Rosalind stepped inside, shivering in their thin cloaks, preparing to face the terrifying Beast King and demand access to the scarred girl they had thrown away. But as they looked toward the dais, their steps faltered, and the blood drained entirely from their faces. Seated upon twin thrones carved of obsidian and draped in the pelts of dire bears were the king and queen of the northern wastes. Alaric sat to the right, a terrifying vision of primal authority, his silver eyes fixed upon the Arringtons with a lethal, icy calm. But it was the woman on the left that brought Cedric to a dead halt. Genevieve wore a gown of midnight blue silk, intricately embroidered with silver wolves howling at a crescent moon. A delicate crown of forged dark iron rested upon her chestnut hair. Her hair was swept back, intentionally and proudly displaying the burn scars that stretched across her face and neck. She did not shrink. She did not hide. She sat with a straight spine and a regal, commanding presence that commanded the utter silence of the hundreds of lichen lords and ladies filling the hall. She was breathtaking. The scars did not diminish her. They amplified her, framing her sharp, intelligent features with an aura of undeniable survival. "Genevieve," Cedric whispered, his voice cracking. He fell to his knees, utterly bewildered. Lady Beatrice stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock and venomous denial. Rosalind gaped, her hands trembling as she looked around the magnificent, wealthy hall, realizing that the sister she had mocked was now a monarch of unparalleled power. "Lord Arrington," Genevieve's voice rang out, clear and cold as a frozen lake. She did not call him father. "You stand before the throne of Ironhold. State your business, or be gone from my lands." Beatrice, recovering her malicious wits, stepped forward, attempting to summon her old authority. She plastered on a fake, maternal smile. "Genevieve, darling, look at you, playing dress-up in the savage north. We have come to bring you home, sweet girl. Our king requires the beast's grain, and we thought, seeing as you have served your purpose as a distraction." A deafening, terrifying roar shook the stone pillars. Alaric lunged forward, half-shifting, his claws extending and his teeth lengthening into fangs. The lichen guards drew their broadswords in unison. Beatrice shrieked, falling backward onto the stone floor. Rosalind burst into hysterical tears. Genevieve merely raised a single, elegant hand. Instantly, Alaric stopped. The guards sheathed their weapons. The absolute, unquestioning obedience. The apex predator showed to Genevieve made Cedric sick with realization. She was not a hostage. She was the master. "You misunderstand your position, Lady Beatrice," Genevieve said quietly, her voice echoing in the terrified silence. "I am not a distraction. I am the fated mate of the Alpha King. I am queen of the lycanthrope clans, and you are a beggar in my hall." Cedric crawled forward, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Genevieve, please. Ethelgard is starving. We have no wheat. Our cattle are dying in the fields. The king will strip us of our titles if we do not secure this trade. I am your father. I beg of you, have mercy." Genevieve looked down at the man who had allowed her to be locked in a freezing attic, who had watched her be thrown into a carriage wearing a mourning veil. "Mercy," Genevieve mused, the word tasting strange on her tongue. "Did you show mercy when you left me in the dark for 8 years? Did you show mercy when you offered me as meat to a man you believed would tear me limb from limb?" Beatrice, desperate and humiliated, shoved Rosalind forward. "If you are truly queen, then prove your benevolence. King Alaric, if this scarred wretch displeases you, I offer you my true-born daughter. Rosalind is untouched, unblemished, a true beauty for a king. Take her and give us the grain." Rosalind sobbed, paralyzed with fear, offering her porcelain neck. Alaric looked at Rosalind, his silver eyes flashing with utter revulsion. He stood, his massive frame towering over the dais. "To a wolf, beauty is not found in skin, human," Alaric's voice boomed. "It is found in the scent of the soul. My queen smells of courage, of ash, of rain and iron. She smells of honor." He stepped down, looming over the trembling Beatrice. "Your daughter smells of rotting vanity. And you, Lady Beatrice, smell of poison and decay. I would not let either of you scrub the mud from my boots, let alone share my bed." He turned his back on them, walking to Genevieve and taking her hand, kissing her knuckles just as he had done in the snow on the day they met. Genevieve stood, looking down at the ruins of her former family. "I am a queen of the North, and my people do not let children starve, even human ones," Genevieve declared, her voice ringing with absolute finality. "I will sign a treaty with King Henry. We will send 300 wagons of grain to Ethelgard. But there is a condition." Cedric looked up, a glimmer of desperate hope in his eyes. "House Arrington will receive nothing," Genevieve said, striking the final, lethal blow to their legacy. "Your lands will not receive a single bushel of northern wheat. Your trade routes through the Spine Mountains are hereby revoked. You will return to your failing estate, and you will live exactly as I did for 8 years, in the cold, in the dark, and forgotten by the world." "No!" Beatrice screamed, clawing at the stone floor, as lichen guards stepped forward to drag them away. "You cannot do this! You are a monster! You are a gargoyle!" "No," Genevieve said softly, as the heavy iron doors were thrown open to the biting winter wind. "I am a survivor. Throw them out." As the screams of her stepmother faded into the howling blizzard outside, the heavy doors slammed shut, sealing the Arringtons to their ruinous fate. The great hall erupted into a deafening cheer, the lichen lords howling their approval, stamping their spears against the stone in a thunderous rhythm of respect for their fierce, unyielding queen. Alaric wrapped his massive arms round Genevieve from behind, pulling her back against his chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, right over the jagged scars that marked her as a warrior, his breath hot against her skin. "Have I told you today, my queen, how utterly terrifying you are?" he murmured, a deep, rumbling purr of adoration vibrating through her. Genevieve leaned back into the embrace of her beast king, a true, radiant smile finally touching her lips. "Only once, my king," she whispered, turning to meet his lips. "But I think we have the rest of our lives for you to remind me." Genevieve's journey from a mocked, scarred outcast to a powerful, revered queen proves that true beauty and strength are forged in the fires of adversity, and that those who seek to destroy you may just deliver you to your greatest destiny. If you loved this story of poetic justice, fierce romance, and the ultimate revenge, please like, share, and subscribe to our video to hear more incredible tales of fantasy and fate. See you in the next epic adventure.